What up, though? Welcome back to World Heavyweights live on Sports.com. I'm your boy Easy, joined by Smo Rex.
What up, though?
Young Chris, Nicholas Koloff, a.k.a. Microwave Mario.
Let's go.
We're also joined by the host of the Bully Ball. You actually put out a great article today, too.
Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, catch up with us real quick. What have you been doing? By the way, this is Zarek joining us.
What up, last time I was here at Premium X Update, I was
Shots. Trying to get assassinated.
Check it again. It's Woodward Sports now.
I got a red dot on my forehead.
It's back to Woodward Sports.
Is it back?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it is?
It's back. The name is up there, and the ad is up there.
Okay.
We are
Do we have a profile
in
picture?
the infantile stages of getting it back.
Okay. Last time I was here,
He was practicing that line in the car on the way.
I swear to God, I was. I had that ready
Motherfucker.
to go. I had enough time in traffic. I've been just busy. I run Bully Ball, which is like a sports media outlet where we discuss a bunch of things, but mostly we try to tell stories through the lens of athletes while also still covering it. So today I put out an article predicting Trajan Langdon's first offseason in Detroit. It had mixed reactions, which I think is pretty expected just because the way I'm expecting this offseason to go will probably have mixed reactions. But yeah, I take pictures, I do writing, video, you name it, pretty much I do it. So we're kind of getting our feet off the ground a little bit, and yeah, it's cool.
Oh yeah, appreciate you joining us. You know, you've been a veteran of the heavyweights now a couple times on.
Yeah, man.
And
Got killed
what
by
we
King's
just
Twitter on
broke
the
down.
heavyweights.
This is some of the
How long did that last?
How long did that last? That was like almost.
They definitely kept the receipts because that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was like
That's like when we were like 2 years ago. Wasn't it? Or a year?
yeah, probably 2022 was the last time I was here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
getting into it with Kings fans.
Man, to this day, I still get stuff for that on Twitter. So
Yeah.
shout out to the heavyweights. They'll never be forgotten. Shout out to the Sacramento heavyweights.
Speaking of getting their feet wet, Trajan Langdon, one of the rumored first moves to be making was the Tobias Harris stuff. It was that the Utah Jazz and Detroit Pistons are the serious contenders to sign him. I'm not gonna lie, I definitely was enjoying myself last night. Killed a fifth, my boy Chris. Shout out.
Shout out.
All right, I didn't know it was take me where it took me. However, I think there's reasoning behind it, right? Like this ownership group has dealt damage to me as a Detroit Pistons fan, and I'm a Detroit Pistons fan that grew up on the 04 Pistons and you know the going to work Pistons and the 5 straight Eastern Conference Finals after that. There's just been so much nepotism in the past, and just knowing that like the past with Michael Tellum and Arm Tellum and the contracts like John Lure, how much is Tobias Harris going to get paid in a situation where we're not going to be winning games for a minute? And you just told us you're taking on expiring deals and salary dumps for assets. Why are we grabbing cap space or salary cap dumps on the open market?
So it's kind of like one thing I had compared the Pistons' current situation to was kind of like the Jazz the last few years, where if you looked at them, they're kind of threading the needle between like developing a young core while also still trying to get veterans that fit the pieces they have. And while they, yes, are going to go out and get acquiring assets, looking at Tim Hardaway Jr., expiring assets, big contracts where they get like maybe a pick, a young player, etc. Those are things they're looking to do. But with every single move they look to do this offseason, it's with the intention of getting better. Like I know maybe a Tim Hardaway Jr., I don't know, Tobias Harris, and like name a guy. Easy, give me a guy.
What, just like an expiring deal?
Yeah, like or a contract, Levine, something like that. Like it might not something right. Like it might not be a sexy offseason on paper, but the pieces that they're going to look to acquire, yes, maybe big contracts that other teams are trying to get off of, but it's with the idea that these guys are going to come in, contribute on the court, and then also provide veteran presence. Because, like, I mean, it's no secret. Like, between the last 2 seasons, the Pistons have a combined 31 wins, which is just ridiculous, right? So they're looking to get better, but they have to start somewhere. And I know you and I kind of, we didn't get into it, you know?
No,
we
I saved it for here.
Yeah. I think what you're stuck on, and I don't blame you. And like, that's the thing. I don't really blame any Pistons fan that initially does feel upset about how things might go this offseason just because of how things have gone, right? Like I said, 31 wins in the last 2 seasons. Like, that's unacceptable. However, I think if you look at things as a step-by-step process versus the bigger picture, it'll make a lot more sense. Like, you mentioned Houston last night on Twitter. Houston was a team that
I think you brought them up.
Or
they signed veteran pieces.
Yeah.
But I just said they had correlating pieces in place already, like guys that kind of fit.
Like who
and,
though?
and like, well, I think Green fits nice. Obviously, they finally got their point guard in Thompson, right?
Yeah.
You have Sengun who can stretch the floor for you. Obviously, Jabari Smith. They're hoping that thing works out as it goes along.
Yeah.
Those pieces were already in line and looking like somewhat promising for damn sure better than what the Pistons had. It made sense to sprinkle in some veteran pieces there. I'm looking back at situations like Koo, and I don't know if it was on the same podcast with you, but I'm listening to people kind of going at Troy Weaver for making a Jeremy Grant signing instead of taking on those assets. Taking on expiring deals along with assets and building the right way. I mean, you're looking at teams. I brought it up before you came here, but you look at OKC, who's kind of transforming the organization time and time over again through draft picks, right? Acquiring assets, and whether you're drafting players with that or using those assets to go and get a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you're using those draft picks to build your team from it. The Boston Celtics, similar situation too. Just shit ton of draft picks, like do it that way. But then how are we? I guess mocking Troy for going and making that signing for Jeremy Grant. But now here we are in the same situation, restart, and now we're like, let's bring in Tobias.
Well, to be fair, I liked Jeremy Grant signing at the time.
I did like Jeremy Grant too.
But it's because of the timeline. The Pistons were literally just starting a rebuild back in 2020 when they signed Jeremy Grant, Mason Plumlee, all those guys. They were literally just starting a rebuild. And they still had guys like Blake Griffin on their team, guys like Derrick Rose on their team, where it was kind of a mix of just a bunch of random things. If they had gone out and acquired assets, they probably wouldn't be in the position they are today, where the Pistons, if they wanted to make like a move for a Brandon Ingram or somebody like that, they can't go out and trade one of their first round picks because they're all locked up in protections due to a trade they made that same first year on the job where Troy Weaver took over. So right now, you kind of have to start from ground zero, but at the same time, you have to get better. And Tobias Harris is a piece that helps you get better. I think Tobias is someone who, yes, has a bad reputation because of how he played in the playoffs. But
I like Tobias, though.
Basketball-wise,
it makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. It makes sense basketball-wise, and you want to talk about like fit with the team. Tobias fits with the team, like the team really needs someone who can kind of be like that stretch 4 or maybe even a 3 if they want to play him there, who can provide spacing. He doesn't really get injured often. He's usually pretty available, and he provides a lot on the offensive end while also not being a complete defensive liability, looking at like a Bojan Bogdanovic last couple of years, right? Yeah. So I think you're just improving where you can while also making someone like Cade's life a lot easier on the daily, So like Cade doesn't have to go out and pray for one of the guys who their games aren't suited to be shooters to just catch a ball in the corner and shoot 35% from 3 on like high volume. Like that's not how winning basketball is played. So if you can get someone like Tobias Harris to be that guy who can catch a ball from Cade when he's driving and kicks it out, that's exactly what he's coming here
so
for.
That's what you're seeing it as. I just want to know the contract. What you expect the contract to be? Is it going to be a multiple-year thing where he is a part of this team for the long run? Even though Trajan Langdon just said like that's not what we're going to do. We're going to bring in expiring contracts. Or do you expect it to be a couple-year deal? You bring him in, you have him run with the young guys for a while, and then try to ship him at the deadline for more pieces.
I think it might get confused a little because like Trajan did say, yes, we will look as an option to take on big contracts, but that's not like the only thing they're going to do, And as far as like his contract number, on the article I had put out today, bullyball.net, I had put it as a 3-year deal, $90 million total, which would leave it at $30 million annually. Yeah. However, I have it as a team option for the last year because I really do see this basically as the exact same signing Houston made last year, where they went out and gave Fred VanVleet a 3-year deal with a team option for the last year.
Fred VanVleet, though, NBA champion. Like I like Tobias, and again, I think the fit makes sense basketball wise. But like, my man's almost coming up on like $250 million.
Yeah,
no all team defense, no all NBA, no all-stars, no championships, 0 points in a playoff game last year. Like, and I get he has leadership. I look at it as if they bring him in as an experiment to see, okay, if we're truly going to commit to Cade, let's give him the pieces that we envision him with, like that stretch four and stuff like that. We'll see if he's able to deliver on that end to make the investment fully on him, because now it's being teeter-tottered around, and I don't believe it's happening in the organization. Or maybe it is because they have to evaluate everything at this point, right? But like, some people are talking about moving on from Cade. Some people are talking about moving on from Ivy. Like, you got to. I look at it as that, but at $30 million, that's an expensive fucking experiment.
It is, but Tobias isn't really much of an experiment. Like for what he is, what you're getting from him, right?
I know that, but like, I think the experiment's like, okay, they want to make sure he's worthy of investing like these type of pieces in.
I mean, you got to start by giving him NBA players, and Tobias is an NBA player. So if you go out and you get a Tobias Harris, it's just taking pressure off of Cade. That's really all. Like, that's all it is. Whatever they do this offseason will be catered around their franchise player, who is Cade Cunningham, who will be getting that extension, by the way.
Yes.
So anything they do this offseason, whether it be acquiring a big contract like a Tim Hardaway Jr., who is someone I know that Cade has looked forward to playing with since, like, I think his rookie year, that's kind of been known. Guys who can shoot, guys who can take pressure off him offensively, and then whatever else they do is around the margins also fits the identity of the team. So it's really just kind of building an identity right now is what they're doing. And again, like I said, like, it's not going to look sexy on paper, right? Like, they're not going to go and get like a Brandon Ingram, a Paul George, one of those guys. But I do expect them to get better. And I think Tobias Harris does make them better.
What does that mean for the rotation and the logjam? Because you're going to have to move. I talked about, needing to move off 2 of the 5 pieces of Asar, Ivy, Stu, the 5th pick, and Duren. Like, you probably have to move off of 2 of those 5 pieces, whoever they are. If you bring in Tobias, then you have Asar and Stewart and Tobias all in that logjam for 4 wing, the 4 position, the wing minutes. What happens with that? Because I feel like to bring in the best veteran, you should move some of the young guys. Is my thought process, rather than just giving one $30 million.
I mean, yeah, I don't think the entire young core will still be here at the start of the season. Like, I know they're interested, at least based on what Trajan said in his introductory press conference. It sounds like they're interested in seeing what they have in the young core.
Yeah.
But that also means picking the guys right now that you see, okay, let's try and build a roster around these guys. And whoever doesn't fit that vision, let's move off of them and get assets while we can. So I couldn't tell you like who exactly they're going to move off of or who they see as keeping, besides obviously like Cade. So it's hard to tell, but I can't imagine they keep every single guy, because if you keep the entire young core, that's almost a 10-man rotation, right? So that there's just no way they run it exactly back.
Yeah, you can't do that with a 14-win team. You can't run back the entire rotation. But
No.
one thing you spoke on that I want to hit on is a Trajan press conference. How much of that, because I've seen that kind of conversation playing out, right? Where how much of that was kind of GM speak, and how much of that do you think was him actually kind of showing his cards? Because we've seen organizations say one thing and do another, or hold the cards close to their vest. The big takeaway from the press conference was that Trajan's looking to take on bad contracts, acquire assets. Do you think that was truth, or do you think that he's holding the cards close to his chest and there's a little bit more at play?
I mean, I definitely think there's an element of truth to it for sure, but Trajan strikes me as someone who's very calculated in the things that he does and says. So I wouldn't be surprised if he says one thing and then kind of goes out and makes a move that maybe doesn't exactly correlate with that, So I couldn't tell you exactly what his plan is, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't showing all of his cards. To me, he seems like Tom Gore said he was his CEO, the CEO of the Detroit Pistons now. A CEO isn't going to tell you exactly every single thing he's planning on doing with his business, because that's not a successful business strategy, right? Like, you have to keep certain things close to the deck or close to your chest. And I think that's kind of what's happening here. Like, you even look at someone like Tim Hardaway Jr., if they do end up, making this trade. Yes, he is I wouldn't even say he's really a large contract. It's like 16 million.
16 million, yeah.
It's really not that large, but you're taking on a contract that Dallas doesn't really want. And then I assume they're going to acquire an asset with him as well. Sure, that aligns with, yes, we're going to acquire big contracts, but that might just be the extent of acquiring big contracts, you know? So they could just look to free agency for the rest of their improvement, or they could look to make moves that include a young guy in getting better. So it's kind of hard to tell.
And that is what, Mark Stein put out there was Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Pistons, potentially Quentin Grimes going to Dallas in that move. And that's what I felt you're not just giving up Quentin Grimes just for Tim Hardaway Jr. straight up. You're going to be receiving something back in compensation for that. Is that a move you would like to see them make, or you'd be happy with? Because I feel like that's kind of a linear move, is to get up Quentin Grimes for Tim Hardaway Jr.
I mean, right now, Tim Hardaway Jr. provides you way more offensive reliability than Quentin Grimes did. And he also provides you more availability than Quentin Grimes did, because I think Grimes only played like 6 or 7 games with the Pistons after joining at the deadline. I personally really like Quentin Grimes as a 3-and-D prospect.
Me too. I loved him.
I think he has, if he stays healthy, he could have a long future in the NBA. The question is he healthy? And the other question is, do you want to pay him next summer? Because next summer he's going to need a new contract. So I can't disagree with the mentality of moving off of him, although I do like him as a prospect. I don't think it's as linear. If it was like Alec Burks for Tim Hardaway, then I'd say, yeah, it's linear.
Yeah.
But when it's Quentin Grimes, who really wasn't available for a lot of games, and then when he was, his shot was not falling at all outside of like that one New York game.
Yeah.
I would say it's actually an improvement. And then you're also acquiring assets to improve at that position.
I also just see, like, if we've had all of these grand delusions of Brandon Ingram and all these other players that could potentially, and if we bring in Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr., that's just Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks in different jerseys.
Bojan and Burks from Gucci is what I say.
It's 3-4 more wins.
But the difference between Bojan and Burks and Tobias and Tim Hardaway might not be like huge, right? But Tobias is someone who is going to be available, and with Bojan in both seasons he played, availability was like a huge issue, because there's no secret, right? Like, he's like 34, 35 right now, and like his calves are dust, right? Like, that's just they're not there anymore. So if you have someone like Tobias who's consistently giving you that offensive production while also being able to help out on defense, that's still an improvement. Is it like leaps and bounds better? No, but also you have to consider, like, okay, you have Tobias, you have Tim Hardaway, and whatever else they do in this offseason. You're going to put that in a new offensive system with a coach who might not start Killian Hayes for half of a season, right? Over an actual NBA player. Because I really do think coaching does play a factor. Do I think changing a coach without changing a roster is going to change anything? No, not really. But if you make moves that make basketball sense, because that's really all it has to be this offseason. Make moves that make basketball sense, that fit your main player, Cade Cunningham. If you make moves that fit his play style.
Not drafting Jaden Ivey.
All right, like, okay, I know we've gone over this for a couple years. I'm not ready to say for certain whether him and Cade fit, because, like, I mean, we all know what happened this last season, right? Like, where a lot of things were going on, where Ivy was in the rotation and then not really in the rotation, and then they would stagger their minutes, but then they wouldn't stagger their minutes, and it was just the whole thing. I would like to see what comes out of this season if they do choose to hang on to Jaden Ivey. If it still looks shaky, I'll give you your flowers. I'll give you.
But it looks shaky as now. We're agreeing to that part at least.
Yeah, it looks shaky right now, but I wouldn't completely write it off either. Like, I don't think they've really had a fair shake at things, because Ivy now will have his third coach in 3 seasons. Cade's gonna have his third coach in 4 seasons, technically 3 seasons played. You can't really build chemistry, and you can't really build a system when there's constant things changing in how you play. So I think you really have to see.
But if you have to stagger them to make it work, is that really a fit?
I mean, yeah, because if you have
it's not
someone
on the
like
court together, being effective at the same time.
if you have Kyrie and Luka, in the playoffs. I'm not saying they're Kyrie and Luka, but you know what I'm saying. Like you have to stagger those minutes. If you have two dominant guards, you can't just take both out at the same time because you need one in at.
So I wouldn't call it a fit. If you're staggering them, if you take them off the floor to alleviate the other one.
Well, you always stagger your best players.
Yeah, that's just that has nothing to do with
Tatum and Brown. Don't stagger. They play well together.
Yeah, they do. There's definitely minutes. There's definitely minutes every
They are
game.
not on the court all the time at the same time.
Like for this to be effective, it has to be a staggered situation.
I think that's applicable to like anything though, because like.
Yeah.
You said, Tatum and Brown. Like Tatum and Brown are not
staggered.
always on the court at the same time.
I'm on your side with this,
but they're not staggered in the same sense. Like this would have to be like, you may have like, hey, take over for a minute. He needs a break, but they still work on the floor together in a winning.
A majority of their minutes is on the court at the same time.
Yeah, it's not. They're not staggered the same way. It's crazy.
They should play together. Don't get me wrong. They should play together. But I also think if one's off the court, you probably do need one on the court at the same time. Because those are your two best guards. So if you have one of your best guards on the court most of the time, you're doing pretty good.
Fellas,
I think they work best staggered. Well, I think we're agreeing to that.
Yeah.
This is kind of leads up to my question about this core four that we've heard so much about between Ivy, Duren, Asar, and Cade. And my question to you would be, which one do you think the most likely is to get moved out of that core four? And which one would you personally move off of if you're getting a positive NBA starter in return?
Nick's got his finger crossed for one name.
I don't. This is a straight non-bias in this question.
Who did you have in your article today as the young pieces to move off of?
I actually kept pretty much everyone outside of Grimes, actually, and I think that was it. I think I held on to. Now, that's not saying all of them are going to have the same amount of minutes or even be in the rotation, but I think adding veteran pieces for them to learn from that actually can provide presence on the court, not just guys who are kind of like skeletons of what they used to be. I think that adds a lot. But if they had to move off of one, I feel like it's Duren. And I honestly, just as a basketball fan, not just as someone who's always around the Pistons, I like all of the players in the Pistons young core. Like even if they hadn't drafted Cade, I liked Cade. Same with Ivy, same with Duren. And same with Asar. I love the Thompson twins. But with Duren, with him being as much of a defensive liability as he is right now, it's pretty easy to go out and get a center who can kind of give you similar offensive production while also being able to hold his own defensively. So if you had to move off of one right now, it's probably Duren.
Do you see where I'm coming from on the Tobias Harris stuff?
No, that's the thing. I totally understand. Like anyone, because pretty much everything that I've heard and that I've been seeing reported about this team and people reacting to, I understand why you wouldn't like it or why you wouldn't want that to happen. But I'm just saying, like, take a step back first and like.
No, I get the basketball part of it.
Yeah,
I never like I've.
I totally get what you're saying.
He is. I said it before he came here. The Keegan Murray pick that I wanted. Like he is the guy's, 6'7", stay in the quarter, knock down some threes, stretch the floor, all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I just think we should be in a mode to be acquiring assets. And I guess I want to touch on that. Do you agree to that being a philosophy of building something successful, especially going off of like this Boston Celtics run? I know they just now finally cashed in the championship, but they've been there in the dance for, I feel like ever since, Tatum and Brown got their feet under them. And no, they aren't staggered, Chris.
I think, acquiring assets is like a huge part of team building, especially when you're building from scratch. And like, especially when you're not starting off a rebuild with a Paul George trade, a KG, which I think was what KG, Paul Pierce, and
Ray Allen.
Rondo.
Yeah. No, it was
Jason
got
Terry.
dunked on by LeBron.
Jason Terry.
Jason Terry, there we go.
Yeah.
We're not starting off with like a trade like that or Paul George, Russell Westbrook, etc. You have to kind of just take on bad contracts. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
The Pistons didn't do that. So they're in the position now to do that with their cap space. However, that doesn't mean that's the only thing they can do. You know what I mean? So I think whatever happens with this Tim Hardaway Jr. deal is taking on not necessarily a great contract for his value, while also most likely acquiring assets in return. And I think the draft also is a perfect example of how to acquire assets while getting something you want, because I'm fairly certain the Pistons will be trading back tomorrow especially with the amount of interest there is in Donovan Clingan. If he's there at 5, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be interested in trading up to 5 to get Donovan Clingan. So that's where you collect some assets, some maybe additional first-round picks, whatever it may be. That's where you do that, and then you also get a young player that you like at whatever pick you trade for.
Cody Williams, please.
I think that's very plausible. So, and that's also what I put in my article on bullyball.net.
Check it out.
But I think it's not as black and white as it seems. You know, like I think, yes, you can acquire assets, but no, you don't only have to take on bad contracts in order to acquire assets. I think those two things happening, if they do end up happening, are both good starts at acquiring assets and picks.
And I do want to get into the draft in a second, but back to the Tobias Harris thing for just one more question. My whole thing with it was nobody willingly will come play basketball in Detroit unless they are getting a shit ton of money to do so. And Tobias Harris is a guy who a lot of teams would like to have as a part of their rotation. He could go play, and he's already made a lot of money in his career. So he could go play in Milwaukee. He could stay in Philly. He could go play in Dallas, somewhere where he has a chance of winning a championship, which he won't in Detroit for the next 10 years. Now, the only reason he would somewhat be inclined to come to Detroit is if he is getting a lot of money. And that's what I just can't do. Like, overpaying for a guy is one thing if you are right there and you're ready to go, but to overpay for a guy to still be a lottery team is just not something I would be a part of.
I understand that, but I would also say, like you said, it's no secret nobody really wants to come to Detroit, right? Like, I think James Edwards reported that they had trouble bringing in certain prospects for workouts. So it's gotten even to the draft now where guys are like, Detroit, I don't know if I really want to, waste my time.
Certain guys would even work out with us.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So if guys don't even want to work out for you and you have a guy who is proven as a reliable 3-and-D guy who you know what you're going to get out of, who's not like old as shit, right? And is still able to provide on the court, in the locker room, and just overall have a great presence on the team. And he's got a little chip on his shoulder from catching a lot of shit in Philly because,
it's Philly.
Yeah. So he's gotten a lot of shit the last few years, and he had a rough playoff experiences last year where I think he does want to prove something. And I think Detroit is kind of like that perfect place where, yes, he could go to even Utah and get the same money, but he's interested in coming to Detroit. Yes, it's reported he has family here and stuff like that. But I think part of it is this team, nobody really wants to give this team a chance. Nobody really wants to give me a chance. I know he's not a young player. He's not going to all of a sudden turn into an all-star, but I think having that type of attitude is the right type of attitude you want in this locker room in order to turn things around, because you really have to start at the very ground level of changing the culture. And having a veteran like Tobias Harris, who's still in his prime, who wants to be here, who wants to teach these guys while also being like, screw everything else. Like, I'm still good. I'm going to show everybody that I'm not like what you make me out to be. I think that's a good combination of things. And it's exactly like why I brought Fred VanVleet up last night as an example of what Tobias could be for Detroit.